They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmers podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou Reggie. That's Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmers podcast. Wherever you are, however you're listening, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. Hopefully, our goal is to make it a little bit informative, sports-wise, and maybe even a little bit entertaining if we can do it, hopefully intentionally. I do have a rant to go on in the beginning of our second hour, which is going to be exciting because I haven't had a rant yet. I'm kind of excited for that. There's AFC West. We're going to be breaking down our last divisions. We've been doing 2 divisions a week, AFC, NFC. This week is the last of the bunch. The AFC West will be ranking in order, first to last, both Jose and myself, and who we think is going to win the division. The entire sports world is on its way back, almost, so we'll be touching on that in the top of hour 2. The end of this hour, we're going to be going to the NFC West and see who we think is going to be coming out of that division from first to worst. But first, I do want to start off with some breaking news this week. And there's a lot to talk about. First and foremost, thankfully, it's something actually football related and completely sports related. Dalvin Cook, Minnesota Vikings running back, is holding out. And this marks, 3 major running backs we've seen in the last year or so holding out, where we saw Le'Veon Bell hold out, and it's debatable whether or not he got what he wanted. Then we saw Melvin Gordon attempt and fail miserably with the Chargers. He's a Bronco now. And finally, we have Dalvin Cook, who is a stellar running back, I think. But whether or not it's going to work is very interesting to me. And I think that the larger picture that this brings up is I think there needs to be a referendum on how running backs are being contracted out. Obviously, Zeke Elliott is the other one. I knew there was somebody else in there, but he held out a little bit, and then Jerry Jones caved and paid him far more money than I think maybe he was worth, given the state of running backs in the NFL. But I think there needs to be a referendum here. And I think running backs should be an exception to the new rookie policy. And it should be shorter guaranteed contracts. Give them 2 or 3 year contracts. Let it be guaranteed and let them be separate from the rookie wage scale. Or increase them. You can make it a rookie wage scale, but make them guaranteed. I think it's showing that obviously Dalvin Cook is another highlighted person who is making this clear that the way it's set up now is just not working. Now I bring in Jose Ortiz, my esteemed colleague and co-host, and to ask if am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. The only thing I would actually extend it to not just running backs. I think all the rookies could use a shorter window, and I think it would help teams as well. If, you make a bad decision drafting a player, you get a chance to kind of get out of that decision maybe in year 3 instead of year 4. I would propose, instead of having a 4-year with a 5th-year option if you're a first-round pick, you just get a 3-year contract with a 4th-year option, or even maybe even better, a 2-year contract with a 3rd-year option. I think what's happening is, players are getting 500, 600, 700 carries in their college careers, and then going to the NFL. By the time they get to that first contract, they've got nearly 2,000 carries on their bodies, 1,500, 1,600, and teams don't want to pay them. And it's hard to blame them when you see the results of these contracts. For players like Dalvin Cook and other running backs who are going to come up, Derrick Henry, come up for contracts in the future, you really hope that this contract with Melvin Gordon, with Ezekiel Elliott, and with also Christian McCaffrey pay off, because if they don't, it's just going to continue to solidify the point that you just don't need to give a running back a second contract. And in Dalvin Cook's situation, I don't think he has very much leverage. First of all, he hasn't finished one season. He doesn't have one full season to his name. So while we've seen him be very good, we've seen him be great, one of the best running backs in the game when he's on the field. The problem is, can he shoulder a full load? And at this point, it doesn't look like he can. I think it's fair to at least question it. Secondly, if he doesn't play, let's just play it out and say he doesn't play football at all this season. He doesn't become an unrestricted free agent next year. He becomes a restricted free agent, which means any team that offers him a contract, the Vikings can then match that contract, or if they don't match it, the team has to take him and then also give up a draft pick as well. So it's completely different. He really has no leverage. And if I was the Vikings, I would say you need to prove to me that you can finish a full season, play 15, 16 games before I give you the type of money that you want, which he hasn't said what he wants, but he wants a quote-unquote reasonable contract. What does that mean, $10 million a year, $12 million a year? I'm not sure what kind of money he's looking for, but if I'm the Vikings, I'm not paying him right now.
Yeah, and they do have a pretty decent depth at running back. Mike Boone was pretty good. I think he filled in for Dalvin Cook last year towards the end when he I think he got hurt again. They even have Amir Abdullah, the old Lions starter. I mean, he's serviceable, I think. And the thing, what's interesting is that the drop off with some of these running backs, like take the Cowboys for example. Zeke Elliott is a great running back. There's no one can contest that. He's fantastic. But then you look at somebody like the Chiefs drafted Hilaire from LSU, and they're paying him next to nothing. Where Zeke is making what do you get, $90 million? Is the difference in, obviously, I mean, he was a high draft pick, but so was Zeke Elliott for that matter. But is the difference in, if Zeke Elliott's making 20 times what Hilaire is making, he's not 20 times better. And I think that that's a real problem in the world of running backs, is that you're replaceable.
Yeah, and a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, I think he might be one of the special players that is actually worth the money. We'll see by the end of the contract, because I think durability, we've seen him rack up 1,300 yards plus basically in all his seasons that he's at least the ones where he wasn't suspended. We've seen him be one of the best running backs in the game. So I think Ezekiel Elliott is a type of player who might be worth it, but you are right in the sense where you look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't know what he's making as a rookie, but it's certainly nothing close to what Ezekiel Elliott's making. Right. And you look at in a team like the Chiefs, they have to be looking to pay Patrick Mahomes, who's clearly the best quarterback in the game. So you can't pay your running back $15 million a year if you want to have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting decision for the Vikings, especially being that Kirk Cousins making $30 million a year. And I think that's, if I was Dalvin Cook, I'd be pretty upset about that too. It's like, wait a minute, I'm way better than Kirk Cousins, but he's making $30 million a year, and I think he's making 1 point something million this year. Yeah. So I'm kind of hoping it's going to be tough. It's just a tough spot for him. It's a tough spot for Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that after seeing what Derrick Henry did last season with the Titans, I'm hoping in a way that we start to see a revival of like the true running back. And I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I think teams, I mean, it's a copycat league, as everybody knows. So I'm almost expecting the Patriots to start that way, because it seems like Bill Belichick sort of zags when everybody else is zigging. So I'm kind of hoping that we see an upward trend in, whole legit old school running back usage. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but it might. And quick trivia, the last non-quarterback MVP in the NFL, do you know who it was?
I do. It was Adrian Peterson, 2012.
That's right. Good call. Running back last time. And so
and that's the type of player you need to have to win the MVP award. He's just got to be otherworldly at the running back position. So,
yeah. So I mean, and so while Dalvin Cook's holding out, we've seen Colin Kaepernick, who is also in the news. Moving on with some more news of the week. Colin Kaepernick was being held out of the NFL for a few years, and it seems like the NFL has taken a few steps towards walking that back a bit, we'll say. And there's been some interesting theories going out there. I think Malcolm Jenkins said something. He said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, but that the NFL needs to apologize directly to Colin Kaepernick, or they need to assign Colin Kaepernick to an NFL team, which is a little bit funny to me. That's not how the NFL works, Malcolm. Interesting idea. But so my question to you, Jose, is this. Obviously, with all the other stuff that's going on with Kaepernick, I don't think that he can come in after being out of the league for 3.5 years as someone who was based his skill set was the base of his skill set was running the football while he's throwing. And so I'm curious to see if, A, do you think that he will take a backup job if one becomes available? And then B, if you were him, would you take a backup job? So what do you think he'll do, and what would you do if you were him?
Well, I just want to quickly address what you said about Malcolm Jenkins. An apology would mean nothing. It's so hollow at this point, so it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And the whole assigning a team to take him, that's stupid too. If I think he has to take. If someone offered him a backup position, whatever team, let's say it's the Seattle Seahawks or whomever, they offer you a backup job, you kind of have to take the job, because if you don't, it makes it seem like you weren't really serious about getting back into the NFL. No one's going to come back from missing the NFL after 3 years or 4 years, however long it's been, and walk right into a starting role. That just doesn't happen in the NFL. It doesn't happen really in any sport. So to expect Colin Kaepernick, I don't want to speculate on how his skills may have eroded, but to expect him to come back in and be a starter is unrealistic. I think it's much more realistic for him to come in, be a backup. Maybe the starter gets hurt. Maybe the starter underperforms. Colin Kaepernick gets on the field, and then he can go from there. Now, if I were him, I think it would feel very hollow. I don't think I would want to go back into the NFL because I think it would be fake. If you wanted me in the NFL, what's changed in the last 3 years? 2 years ago, you didn't want me. Last year, you didn't want me. All of a sudden, now you want me? Let me think about what's actually changed. It's completely hollow. It would make no sense. Obviously, they'd be doing it just for publicity and to try and make themselves look good. And I don't know if I'd want to contribute to that if I were Colin Kaepernick.
Well, so let me throw out a couple teams for you. I want to see what your feelings are on Colin Kaepernick, because if I were him, I would take whatever backup job is available. I mean, it might be specific to the team, but for a lot of reasons, I'm a little bit of a vindictive person. So if it were me saying, "Oh, you helped me out for a couple years, now look, I was right, and now I'm coming back because you have to take me back, and I'm going to show you," and then I would take it a step further and say, "And look how good I can be, and this is what you missed out on. This is what all the other teams missed out on." I mean, the chip on my shoulder would be a boulder on my shoulder. It would be ridiculous. But the problem is, if he wants to be a starter, you like you said, it's not really realistic. And look at Michael Vick. Michael Vick obviously was out of the league for a very different reason, and he actually did things that were crimes. But he was out of the league for 2 years, and he was a much more prolific player than Colin Kaepernick was. And he also was a few years, I think he was 3 years younger than Cap is right now. And he had to sit behind Donovan McNabb, and then he had to sit behind Kevin Kolb until Kevin Kolb got one of his 37 concussions, and then he took over the starting job, and then he got himself a $100 million contract. But so looking at that, I think Kaepernick, if you're serious, I mean, and I think that I want to believe that he wants to come back, because he did do that kind of goofy summer workout last year. Remember the thing that they did where it was kind of impromptu, like on a Tuesday they did it, and it was this weird, okay, we're giving you a workout. Okay, yep, throw the ball, great, and then nothing came of it. But he looked like he was in good shape. I mean, he could still throw the. I mean, his arm is still looks as strong as ever. His legs are a question. But then, if I'm him and I'm looking at specific teams, okay, here's the three teams, and here's quick reasons why, and I want to get your opinion on these. The Seattle Seahawks. Pete Carroll came out this week and said that they were looking at him, and he got calls about him. I think Colin Kaepernick needs to be. It's a lot like Tim Tebow was in a way, with the fanfare that's behind him as a backup. Obviously, I think Colin Kaepernick is only what Tim Tebow could dream of being talent-wise in the NFL.
Yeah.
But there's a similar following where people want to see him play. They want to see those guys play. So you go to Seattle. Pete Carroll's kind of it's West Coast. It's open-minded. You're kind of easy going out there, and Russell Wilson is the clear-cut starter. There is no one in the NFL, even if they lose 3 games in a row, no one's calling for Colin Kaepernick over Russell Wilson. So I think it's clear and it's set. They can have different schemes for him or whatever. In the same vein, I do think think that the Kansas City Chiefs, believe it or not, would also be a fantastic place for him to go because Andy Reid, remember Andy Reid was the guy who brought Michael Vick back and gave him a chance. Then he, Patrick Mahomes is, he had a black father and a white mother. So he's sort of the perfect person to be ahead of him. So you can't, there's no one that can take that and twist it and say, oh, he's sitting behind a white quarterback or whatever, however you want to, somebody's always going to say something crazy. But if you have Patrick Mahomes, who is clear cut above and beyond, probably the best player in the NFL, no one is saying anything about him. And you can have, I think, it sucks for Matt Moore, but Matt Moore was not really looking to be in the league too much longer anyway. Finally, last one I think he would fit at, and I mentioned this, I think, for Cam Newton, but the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, makes a ton of sense, and for a lot of reasons, and they're not all football related, but the football ones are a lot like Cam Newton. Ben Roethlisberger is the starter of the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no question. He's been there for a decade and a half, but he's also woefully injury prone, and he's probably it's probably his last year. So if you come in as a backup and I think I'm better than Duck Hodges is right now. So Colin Kaepernick is definitely better than he is. And Mason Rudolph he's not looking too good either. And so Kaepernick being there, you can not only have different sets and plays developed just for him, but he's a better, I think Ben Roethlisberger is a better pure passer than Kaepernick was when we last saw him. But I think if you go vintage Ben Roethlisberger, he was he was hard to bring down, and he was somewhat mobile. He came in, he was a tight end, I think, in college. And so it's a good fit in a way. And not to mention that Mike Tomlin is, it's hard to, I guess the politics of it sort of fit because, I look at Mike Tomlin as he's a great coach who happens to be African-American. I don't look at him as a African-American coach, if that makes sense. But the
absolutely, yep.
The optics, which I hate in sports media, but the optics of it it just fits. It fits in a way that I think works on a lot of layers. There's a lot of layers to it and a lot of levels. And the last point I'll make about that is Mike Tomlin has shown that he has a fantastic ability to deal with drama and tune it out for the most part with Le'Veon Bell, with Antonio Brown, even with Ben Roethlisberger for a while. It's clear that he can handle personalities and he can handle the drama in a pretty professional manner. So those are my three. And the last point I'll make is if I'm Colin Kaepernick and I see a potential to be on a team that could go to the Super Bowl next year, I have a chance to send my message to the biggest audience in sports. And maybe that's a secondary reason, but getting a ring would be nice too. I would hope that would be more important, but obviously the message is important. So if you can touch the biggest audience in the world, it has to play a part.
As far as the Kansas City Chiefs and the Seattle Seahawks, I hate to say it this way, but I do think it's important that a quarterback who would be playing ahead of Colin Kaepernick is black, because you don't want there to be, there's a white quarterback playing ahead of him, and that would be a lot of the chatter would be. So with Ben Roethlisberger, as much as I like the fit, I'd be worried that if Ben Roethlisberger had two bad games and they didn't put Colin Kaepernick in right away, that all of a sudden Mike Tomlin's a racist, and so that's one thing I'd be worried about with. I know it sounds stupid, but that's kind of where we are. It seems like it seems like that's where we are. And so I like another team that you didn't mention, the Houston Texans. I think I'm looking A.J. McCarron as their backup quarterback. A.J. McCarron's a decent quarterback, but I think Colin Kaepernick probably could come in and give them just as much. And I look at Deshaun Watson as a somewhat mobile quarterback, maybe not on the level of Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes, but he's still a mobile quarterback, and I think that would be a good fit also, because I just think it's important for him to be behind a black quarterback. It may sound silly, but it just seems like that's kind of where because you're right. No one's going to be calling for Russell Wilson to be taken out of the game. We already know he's a great quarterback. He's proven at the Super Bowl. He's proven he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. The only thing he's really missing is an MVP award. It's, Patrick Mahomes, everyone knows he's one of the best quarterbacks in the game. There's really nothing to say about him. Ben Roethlisberger, I think there is some question about where he stands. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Is he a bottom 10 quarterback? We don't really know, because the last time we saw him, he still had Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell on his team. So it's just hard to say who Ben Roethlisberger is right now. So I think it would be better for him. I like the Seahawks. The Seahawks to me is the best fit.
Yeah. And so I'm curious. I'm kind of hoping that he does come back, because I truthfully would love nothing more than to see Colin Kaepernick come back and just dominate the entire league and prove everybody wrong.
But I feel like he should have come back to he should have tried to join the XFL. Maybe he didn't, maybe he did and I didn't realize. But I was just thinking about it as you were talking about it. That was an opportunity for him to go out there and kind of show his skills. Landry Fields ended up taking over the entire XFL. And, okay, not to say anything bad about Landry Fields. I'm sure he's a good quarterback and whatever the case may be. But couldn't Colin Kaepernick, if he thinks he's good enough to play in the NFL and start, shouldn't he have been able to go to the XFL and just start dominating? I think there was a rumor, and I can't authenticate it right now, but I can look it up in a minute. But there was a rumor that he was asking for just so much more money than they were willing to pay him, that they weren't even, it wasn't even like a feasible. Even if they wanted to, they didn't have the money that he was asking for, which is entirely possible. I've heard that from a couple different places, but I would. Because to me, if you're saying I'm desperate to get back in the NFL, I'm desperate to show that I can play, the XFL, I would just take a 1-year deal, making whatever. I just got a $40 million settlement from Nike, right? So I would just take whatever I could from the XFL to show my skills and maybe get a contract, or at least say, hey, look, I can play. The NFL doesn't want me, and then your case would be proven right then and there. But,
yeah, I wonder if the XFL just wasn't a big enough audience for him. Maybe, it's kind of like the minor leagues, where it just feels like you're taking a step down and you're accepting that you're not in the top tier. And I'm not. I could see that being an issue of pride,
absolutely,
as well as money. So, but okay, moving on. Speaking of people that have been blackballed. More news this week. We're rounding out this news segment. This is a lot of news, strangely enough, for not a whole lot of sports. Reggie Bush, two things. Reggie Bush, it's been this, and this made me feel unconscionably old. It's been 10 years since Reggie Bush was banned from USC. It's not 10 years since he played. It's been 10 years since they found out what he took illegal funds or whatever for his family, and was basically persona non grata from that point forward. If you remember, the NCAA stripped USC of all those titles they won. They stripped Reggie Bush personally of his Heisman. And I think, number one, I'd want my Heisman back, because the Heisman is not something that everybody wins. And when you're in that club, you won it. And this is the problem I have with what USC did. And I think, or the NCAA did to USC rather. There's a lot of, was it TCU that got the death penalty? Wasn't that them back?
I think it was SMU.
SMU.
Yeah.
You're right. SMU. Thank you. I knew it was close.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what happened to USC was probably the worst punishment we've seen since SMU. And to me, it's ridiculous So Reggie Bush was accused of, or I guess it was proven to some extent, that his family benefited. He got illegal money from boosters or whatever, and basically everything that the law they changed in this last year or two was Reggie Bush was guilty of. Now, Reggie Bush was the biggest star from USC basically since Marcus Allen.
Yeah,
he was the most exciting, electrifying player to watch in college, and what he did had nothing to do with what happened on the field. It's not like it was a Pete Rose scenario where he's giving up games and he's throwing games for money or whatever. And to punish the entire team for one person who got caught taking money, that money didn't help Reggie Bush run faster on the field. It didn't help him break tackles more. It didn't help the team win how many titles in a row. It didn't. It makes no sense to me. And you're punishing the entire team. You're saying, no, you guys weren't champions, which in and of itself, I think stripping people of their titles is stupid to begin with because we all saw you do it. We saw Reggie Bush win. I saw USC dominate everybody except Vince Young. And
yeah, I was going to chime in and say the same thing. Stripping titles it makes no sense. You can't erase history. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all.
I want to say that. Yeah, you can't erase history.
The only thing I think it applies to is a situation like the Astros had in MLB, where they were they cheated. It was proven that they cheated to win the games on the field. And that to me is worthy of saying, no, you're not champions because you cheated to get this. Reggie Bush didn't cheat to run faster. He didn't cheat the game. He didn't cheat anybody. He took money for, and if we're looking retroactively, obviously the NCAA finally came around on this, and it's like, hey, this is one of the biggest stars in the entire city of Los Angeles, and you're saying, yeah, no, you don't get anything. Sorry, man. It's just so ridiculous, and I think that they should, USC should do a lot and bring Reggie Bush back, and he should have a statue outside of USC right now because so USC, and this is kind of a tangent a little bit, but USC, I loved watching them, and I think it was because of it was first because they were good, obviously, but the colors, I loved the was it cardinal and gold or whatever they call it, the red and yellow basically, but they have fancy words for it. And just the colors were just electrifying. And obviously seeing Reggie Bush dodge tacklers in those colors made it helped a little bit too. But I was thinking about this today. Have you ever chosen a team, we'll say, or have you known somebody who's chosen a team? I don't know if you want to admit it to yourself because I'm willing to do this, but just based on their team's colors. Is it like, have you ever, because I've seen a friend of mine, I'll never forget, we were doing a football pool at work, and she picked, this is 15 years ago, where she said, oh, I like those colors a lot. It was the Carolina Panthers, and she picked them, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl. So she won just money, just based off, and it just made all of us guys look completely stupid. Where we're like, oh no, sure, you're crazy. It's this, that, and this, that, and this, that, and she's like, yeah, they're pretty colors. I'm gonna pick them, and then she ended up winning. And so I was curious to see if you've ever, because I've done that, and I wanted to ask you first and see if you've ever been a victim of.
So there's two times where that's happened for me, or two situations in which it's happened. So my favorite teams are the 49ers and the Yankees. Those are teams that I just like, have nothing to do with their colors. Yeah. But I used to be my second favorite team back in the 90s when I was a Bulls fan. My second favorite team were the Charlotte Hornets because they had amazing colors. Now, I love Larry Johnson. Muggsy Bogues was short and made me feel like maybe I could be good enough to be in the NBA, which was a dream quickly squashed. But, for at least a year, I was like, hey, I could be good enough to get in the NBA. Alonzo Mourning, they had great players, but I really just enjoyed their colors. I thought their colors were they just stood out to me. Yeah. And I do it basically all the time in the NCAA brackets when there's 68 teams. As much as I watch college basketball, as much as I'm following, I don't know all 68 teams. I'm lucky if I know 30. Like when I say know them, like I've heard of them, but I don't know what their players. I don't know what their schedule. I don't know anything about how good they are. So I can't make a decision between, Wichita State and Murray State. I don't know. So I sometimes just look at the color of the mascot, or look at the team's colors, and I'll make a selection based on that, because we've seen how the brackets go anyway. Basically a coin toss anyway. So, but just to quickly follow up on what you were saying about Reggie Bush, it's nice that he wants his Heisman Trophy back. I think it doesn't really matter though, because we know he won the Heisman. Anyone who's following football during that time, he may not have the physical trophy. We know he was a Heisman Trophy winner. We know he was the best player in the game at that time. And what you said is so spot on. It's so perfect. I wish I would have thought of it before. He didn't cheat the game. He may have taken money. Maybe his mom or his dad took money, but he didn't do anything. He didn't take steroids. Maybe we can get to that, but he didn't take any sort of performance-enhancing drugs. He didn't throw the game. He didn't bet on the game. He didn't do anything on the field that was deserving of a big punishment. This was something that was outside of the field, and for the whole team to suffer in such a way, and really for him to be stripped of what he earned as an athlete, fair and square with his own performance, for that to be removed because of him taking some money. And I don't want to get into how much I hate the whole NCAA, we can make as much money off you as we want, but you can't make any money off yourself at all. I hate that. That's a discussion for another show, but I am completely 150% behind everything you said about Reggie Bush and USC.
Funny story, and this is actually surprising to me, is that we have a lot of random similarities, you and I, and not the least of which is having the exact same birthday. And one thing I did not learn, and we've been friends for what 20 something years at this point.
Yeah.
I did not know that you also had chosen the Charlotte Hornets as a favorite team of yours based on their colors, because that's exactly what I did at the same time. Oh. I was a Charlotte Hornets fan before they were the first NBA team, because I was head over heels. I loved those colors, and then. Same thing. The first NBA jersey I ever bought was a purple Alonzo Mourning jersey, because I loved watching him play, and he wasn't the best center in the league, but I loved his agility, and he was just so aggressive down low, where he did everything that I wish I could be, as a, what was I, 5'4" at that point. But Muggsy Bogues, same thing. Muggsy Bogues made me believe, and I was like, that dude is like an inch taller than me, and he's playing professional basketball. Maybe there's a chance. Larry Johnson too, and then Glenn Rice. I watched his shots over and over and over, and I tried to emulate his shooting ability. Obviously, I came up a little short, but it's so funny. The same thing. The Charlotte Hornets got me into basketball. I picked them because of their colors, and later on I got into the Bulls, and the Bulls too. I mean, obviously Michael Jordan was the big draw, but the Bulls, red and black was just, I mean, you can't get away from how great that is as a color combination. But in any event, I thought that was kind of interesting that I had not known that until right now. So fun fact. But going from one person who took money and got punished for it to the final news topic of the day, Zion Williamson, also gigantic name in college, also in trouble for, I guess, shafting a marketing agency. This is from, so I'm just going to read this really quick. This is from the Sporting News, and it kind of details, Zion Williamson and this representative, Gina Ford, in the lawsuit. And the short version is, goes on to say, shortly after Williamson declared for the draft on April 15th, 2019, he signed a 5-year contract with Gina Ford, president of Miami-based Prime Sports Marketing, to represent him and handle his endorsement deals. Williamson broke that contract, signing with another agency, and then this woman, Gina Ford, started to go after him and is suing him to the tune of $100 million. So I guess there's a couple things with this. Number one, do we care? First of all, and it's Zion Williamson, it's Duke. Obviously, Duke is a brand name, and they are the biggest brand in college basketball. But this is sort of the last hurrah for this not being able to capitalize on your own likeness, and it's a big one because Zion is a huge draw. But I think I don't care. And I think what bothers me more is that both Reggie Bush and Zion kind of promised and signed a contract with one person and then kind of just sort of threw it away and just said, nah, I'm just kidding. I'm not doing that. And that actually bothers me more than him taking money, because if I was him, I would take money too. Are you kidding? If someone offered to wire my dad $100,000 because I was a good basketball player, hell yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
I think you're welcome, Dad. You're welcome, Dad.
Yeah, just but breaking the contract is what is actually the only thing that bothers me between these two stories.
Yeah, I kind of agree, especially in the Zion Williamson situation. You have a contract with an organization, with an agency. They're not at the level of CAA, granted, but you did sign with them. Maybe you signed with them at a time when CAA wasn't interested in you, and this agency took an interest in you, believed in you, and the first chance you got to leave them behind, you did. So if I was that agency, I would also be suing Zion Williamson, and I would imagine there's going to be some sort of settlement. I don't think it's going to be $100 million, but I would imagine Zion Williamson's going to have to pay them some sort of money, because you You don't do that, and especially what is it, year one of the contract? It's not even. It's like it could be one thing if it was in the fourth year. Hey, this is just not working out. I have an opportunity to make more money with the CAA, and I'm going to do that. And I get it. Maybe he made a bad decision. I don't know how old he was when he signed with the agency, but still, you kind of have to live with your decisions in these situations. And I'm kind of, as I've read more and more, I wanted to be on Zion Williamson's side, but I'm kind of not on his side because you gotta honor your contracts, and there's too much of this happening in the sports world today, where players, teams, coaches don't honor their contracts, and they just get away with it. So I'm kind of happy that this agency is suing him and holding him to his word.
Yeah, I mean that agency is looking for $100 million. Obviously, Zion wants to give them $0. So I would imagine that there's going to be a settlement somewhere between those two numbers.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're Zion Williamson, I'm not sure I would assume that he's cognizant enough to realize, and if not, someone's probably going to get in his ear and tell him, you do not want to be under oath, either you nor Mike Krzyzewski, you don't want any of those guys under oath on the stand talking about taking bribes or taking money or that's Pandora's box to the nth degree. I mean, that would be just a nightmare scenario for the NCAA across the board. And it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. It really is.
The longer this goes on, the worse it would be for Zion. They need to end this quickly and quietly.
Yeah, I agree. And so that'll do it for the news. So a lot of news to talk about.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. We're up against the clock, so we'll be right back. We're going to talk what are we doing? The NFC West?
NFC West to start.
All right, we're going to start with we're going to break down the NFC West. We're going to give some predictions, rankings, and reasons why. So stick around. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. We'll be right back.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is the Benchwarmers podcast. We appreciate you joining along in this magical carpet ride of sports entertainment. Jose, I'm terribly bad at the shameless self-promotion that all podcasts seem to need these days. And so let me get that out of the way. You can find us. We're everywhere and growing. We are we're part of the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, which is super exciting. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We're working on Twitter. We'll get there eventually. You can email us if you want. The Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com, on Benchwarmers with a Z across the board for marketing purposes. The YouTube it's not a video per se because we haven't decided if we are camera worthy at this point. So it's just a logo, but you can hear the show in its entirety, hours 1 and 2, for free, by the way, no charge. But come follow us along. We're growing rapidly. This is week 10. We're very exciting. We made it to double digits, and we have, I think, 200 some followers at this point on Facebook, which is exciting. That's a big jump in the last couple of weeks without doing any major marketing. So thank you to everyone who's followed along. With that being said, we're going to move on to the NFC West. And Jose, as a 49ers fan, I'm going to give you the honor of starting off this ranking. So we've been doing, up to this point, we've done the East, North, South, and now we're on the West of both conferences. And just to recap really quickly, last year the order was the San Francisco 49ers obviously won the division at 13-3. The Seattle Seahawks were second at 11-5. The Rams were 9-7, and then the Cardinals round out the division at 5-10. I'd like to know from you, Mr. Jose Ortiz, who you think is going to win the NFC West.
And I thank you. And I just want to say, remind everyone that if you want to hear what our breakdown was of the NFC South or any other divisions before that, please listen to some of our earlier shows. We have all the other divisions in there. You can hear our winners and hear why we decided to pick these guys. But just going on to the NFC West, it's been a very long time since I could say the 49ers were going to win the division and not sound like just a stupid fan.
Yeah.
And I truly do believe the 49ers are going to win the division. It's impossible to measure the impact of Super Bowl hangover. Only 8 teams in NFL history who lost the Super Bowl the year before returned the following year. And of those 8 teams, only 2 went on to win the Super Bowl. The Niners are going to have to buck that trend. They had a top 5 offense last year and a top 5 defense last year. It looks like they basically have almost everyone back. On offense, they lost Emmanuel Sanders, but they did draft Brandon Ayuk in the first round as a replacement, and they also traded away DeForest Buckner, but drafted Javon Kinlaw in the first round. And then the loss of Joe Staley to retirement was replaced by the trade for Trent Williams. So it seems like the 49ers are going to be good. They're going to have a great team. They have Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, Jerick McKinnon returning to the backfield. Well, Jerick McKinnon not returning. He hasn't played yet because he's been injured for the last 2 years. But they lost Matt Breida and replacing him with Jerick McKinnon. My biggest question is really about Jimmy Garoppolo, because the 49ers are going to be, with Kittle, Deebo Samuel, they're going to have a great offense. But in order for them to, for me, in my opinion, in order for them to take that next step and be a Super Bowl winner, they need Jimmy Garoppolo to take another step and be a Pro Bowl level quarterback. You look at his numbers last year, just under 4,000 yards passing. He had a decent season, but not that upper echelon level. And I think the 49ers need just a little bit more from that passing attack. And if they get that, they're going to be a very dangerous team. I think right now I look at them as an 11-win, 12-win team. If Jimmy Garoppolo plays to the next level, the sky is the limit for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the 49ers are the class of that division, and they are just a complete team from top to bottom. The Staley and Trent Williams thing, I think, was a incredible pickup, because they kept his retirement, Staley's retirement, quiet. And then they quietly just snagged Trent Williams and filled that spot almost overnight. And it was fantastic job by John Lynch to keep everyone quiet about that. I agree with everything you said. Brandon Ayuk, it looks like the real deal. He's just a great fit and a fill-in for Emmanuel Sanders, the loss of Emmanuel Sanders, along with everything else. The two things I think really set me over and above with the 49ers as the division winners next year are two things. Jimmy Garoppolo is, his questions come up about him. He overthrew Emmanuel Sanders in the Super Bowl, and he doesn't have it, blah, blah, blah. But if you remember, and I feel like people forget this because we're in sort of a ADD world, it was Jimmy Garoppolo's first full season starting. When he got traded, he was injured. He was out almost the entire year with an ACL tear. And so it's after one full season. I mean, my God, give the guy 2 seasons, can you? And they did pretty good last year. I mean, they were leading by 10 points against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So maybe just ease up and give the kid a break and let him find his way. I mean, we're so quick to judge, and he had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah.
And I think he's just going to get better. He's certainly an ascending player. I don't expect any sort of, I don't even what you call, it's not even a sophomore slump, a junior slump. I mean, that doesn't exist. So, and then finally, I think that Kyle Shanahan is I think he's an X factor to the tune of, I mean, it's Bill Belichick worthy. He's not quite in the same class yet because he hasn't been a head coach nearly as long. But I think I would put I was trying to rank the coaches today. I was walking my dogs. I was like, I think Kyle Shanahan is top 5 in coaching. I mean, it's Absolutely. Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, I would say, and then maybe John Harbaugh are the only ones that I would really probably put ahead of him. But if you're asking me who I want my team to start with, and between his age, he's a young guy, relatively, and he's shown that he can take sort of these these misfit toys and make them into just an incredible offense that is it's just unstoppable for the most part until Super Bowl. But I think that him getting better and him being progressing as a head coach, I think those two factors make it pretty clear that the NFC West is going to be led by the San Francisco 49ers in 2020.
And we didn't even mention that Nick Bosa is going to get better. He was a rookie last year, rookie of the year or defensive rookie of the year. They have a great they have a great defense returning, and I completely forgot about Kyle Shanahan. I'm doing all this player breakdown. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan is such a great X factor. So yeah, great point.
Yeah. So in second place, I took the Seattle Seahawks, I think. And without obviously, I mean, DK Metcalf is taking a step forward. He looks like a freak of nature, and he had a little bit of a hands issue last year, but I can promise you that he's been working on that in the offseason, and it hasn't gone unnoticed because, what he run a 4.3 40. I think he's 225 pounds and 6'4", I believe.
Yeah,
and so he's a monster. I mean, he's incredible, and he's just going to get better. The Seahawks they suffered a whole bunch of cluster injuries at running back. Chris Carson, I forget which one. One of them dislocated his hip. One of them messed up their knee, and they ended up bringing back Marshawn Lynch. Strangely enough, who, by the way, I did notice he had a cameo in the most recent season of Westworld.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, Marshawn Lynch. I was like, I know that guy. That's a big deal. Who is that big dude? I've seen him before. And then I saw the credits. It was Marshawn Lynch. I was like, oh, look at Marshawn Lynch getting into acting. All right. And he did a pretty good job. But
I had no idea.
In any event, the biggest thing for me with the Seahawks, Pete Carroll is a good coach. I think that's been proven. But Russell Wilson, I feel like if it's possible to be underrated as a Super Bowl champion and then a perennial MVP candidate, which is crazy that he doesn't have an MVP by now. I think maybe this is his year. I think Russell Wilson is the X factor. And if you watch some of the games last year, I mean, just some of those amazing games that they had was just Russell Wilson making something happen. And he just has a magic and a will to win that is almost unparalleled. I mean, it's Brady-esque in its devotion to winning. And I think it's been proven in Patriot Brady fashion. You can throw a bunch of stuff around him and he'll make some magic happen. He might not get you to the Super Bowl, but he'll make those guys better than they've ever been before.
Yeah, I completely agree with the Seahawks at second place. Russell Wilson, whenever you have Russell Wilson, you have a chance. Right. Since entering the NFL in 2012, he's 86-41 with one tie, has never had a losing record, not one season with a losing record, and has been in the postseason 7 out of 8 years with 6 Pro Bowl appearances during that time. Russell Wilson is a difference maker. He had one of his best seasons ever last year, 431 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 4,100 yards. That's a monster season. And he's still effective with his feet. For years, I would say I didn't believe in Russell Wilson because I thought what he was doing was too fluky. We're going on year 8 right now. At this point, this is who he is. He's a great player. He makes things happen, and that's kind of what elevates him to me. I think is the second best quarterback in the NFL, behind Patrick Mahomes. But we could get into that debate another time. You already mentioned DK Metcalf. They have Tyler Lockett on the other side of him, so they have a great receiving core. Chris Carson. He's going to be healthy. It looks like back-to-back 1,100 yard rushing. Back-to-back seasons with 1,100 rushing yards or more. They have a reliable tight end and Greg Olsen they brought in. The one big problem, and I think the one thing that has held the Seahawks back a little bit, is that their offensive line is terrible. Last year, their offensive line ranked 27th according to Pro Football Focus, and they had the second most sacks allowed. And they didn't really do much in free agency or in the draft to address it. So I don't really know how we can expect Russell Wilson to not be running for his life again this season. But if somehow their offensive line can take a step forward, the Seahawks are going to be a dangerous team. I expect them to be in the playoffs. And the other thing I would say is their defense was not that great last year, but they did spend a first-round pick on defense, so it seems like they're trying to address it. It's just I'm really worried about that offensive line. I still feel solid about them being in second place, but I'm really, really worried about their offensive line.
Yeah, no, I think that's why they're in second place. I think that that magic can only go so far for Russell Wilson if he's, he can only have magic if he's not on his back. It's kind of hard to be good when you're flat on your back getting crushed.
Yeah, and that magic only comes because his offensive line is terrible. I'm sure he would like to just sit there in the pocket and throw the football instead of his pocket breaking down all the time.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think that he would still be able to concoct some magical moments, but they might be a little more successful, even more successful, with a little bit more time to work his magic. And so,
yeah.
So in third place, so far we agree on the NFC West, and we are both in agreement that the 49ers are going to win the division. Then Seahawks we have in number 2, which again is kind of going a little bit chalk, but sometimes chalk is chalk for a reason. And so in third place, though, I'm not sure. I don't know where you sit on this. Obviously, we don't really discuss our rankings ahead of time with each other. But I have the Arizona Cardinals as the third place team in the NFC West. And only because the top 2 teams are so clearly impeccable from top to bottom. Because the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray is in year 2, and I will be the first to admit that I was wrong about Kyler Murray. I did not expect him to be good in the NFL. I thought he proved something to me last year that I have to admit I was wrong. And he looked good. He was fun to watch. He made plays. He didn't, it wasn't all great, but he definitely had a good starting point as far as a quarterbacking career goes. And I think in year 2, he's just going to get better. And you still have Larry Fitzgerald. Christian Kirk is a speedster now. And obviously the big addition of DeAndre Hopkins is DeAndre Hopkins might be the best receiver in the league. And so you have a guy, not only do you have DeAndre Hopkins as a clear-cut number 1, you have a possession receiver and a mentor, really, a leader in the locker room with Larry Fitzgerald, who you can believe is going to be excited to be on a good team again and have a real quarterback throwing to him. And then, Christian Kirk is sort of the speedy guy who can take the top off the defense and maybe make some noise. They didn't really address their offensive line too much. I mean, they picked Josh Jones out of Houston in round 3, who was number 72 overall. I'm not sure. I mean, that's a good start, but I mean, Kyler Murray was running a lot last year, but a lot of it was running for his life because their offensive line was just disturbingly bad. And if you remember, Josh Rosen before him was a victim of that even more so because he's not nearly the athlete that Kyler Murray is. And so all in all, they did go a little defense heavy. They picked a linebacker, Isaiah Simmons, in round 1 from Clemson, who was a good addition. They picked another linebacker later on in round 6, Evan Weaver. And then it's a couple defensive tackles in there. But I think that they have talent, and Cliff Kingsbury is another one who I think he's gonna get better. He's gonna, he's obviously gonna learn from his mistakes last year. And I think that it's barring, if there's even the remotest chance of an injury to any of the big names in the Niners or the Seahawks, the Cardinals could be a sleeper team and sneak into the playoffs.
I wouldn't even expect them to sneak into the playoffs. I have the Cardinals at 3rd, and I don't think it's going to be sneaking. I expect them to be in the postseason because I think 3 teams from the NFC West, the best division in football, are going to make the postseason. You look at the Cardinals, they're absolutely a team on the rise. You already talked about DeAndre Hopkins. If he's not number 1, he's in the top 3. So there's not even a discussion about that. If he's not the best receiver in the game, he's number 2 or 3. Then you look at, they have Kenyon Drake coming back. They gave him the transition tag. The final 8 games of the season last year, he averaged 5.2 yards per carry. He was an absolute revelation for them at the running back position. So he's going to be, we already know Kyler Murray is great. He's going into year 2. You expect him to take a step forward. I think he had 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions last year. You'd expect the touchdowns to go up, the interceptions to go down. Then you're right. They have Larry Fitzgerald, the number 2 receiver, Christian Kirk, number 3 receiver. Then they also have returning 2 Pro Bowlers on defense in Chandler Jones and Budda Baker. And they're going to get a healthy Patrick Peterson back, who missed the Pro Bowl for the first time in his career last season because he was injured. As you pointed out, the offensive line was a bit weak, and That's where the game ends and starts and ends a lot of times. So they do have to get better there, and I think they'll go up and down a little bit. I don't think they're going to be in that 10 to 12 win range, but I could see them winning 9 to 10 games in that area, and I think that'll be enough to claim one of the wild card spots in the NFC.
Which means that we both also share the Los Angeles Rams coming in at a distant fourth, and I don't know if you want to go first and give your thing, because I've taken two. So
yeah, it's fine. I look, it's not exactly that I think the Rams are a bad team. I just think they're a mediocre team in a really good division. And 2 years ago when the Rams lost the Super Bowl, they looked like they're going to be a team that was going to contend for a while. But in 2019, they went from averaging 32.9 points per game the year before to 24.6 points per game, and went from third in rushing yards to 26th in rushing yards. The offensive line was one of the worst in football last year, and they didn't address it in the draft or in free agency. And one of the things I noted when I was looking at in 2018 and 2019, trying to figure out what happened, why did they get worse? Jared Goff had to throw the ball more. That sounds really bad, like, your number one overall pick quarterback, you want him to throw the ball more. Well, that's not – he was forced to throw – so in 2018, he had 561 attempts. In 2019, he had 626 attempts. You just don't want him throwing the football that much. And we saw when their running game got worse and the ball was kind of forced to be in Jared Goff's hands, he didn't really rise to the challenge. He had some moments here and there. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. And when you're not a great quarterback, you need great players around you. And Todd Gurley wasn't great last season. Their offensive line wasn't great last season. They lost Brandon Cooks. They lost Todd Gurley, and they've replaced him with Cam Akers, maybe. Darrell Henderson, I'm not sure who the starter is there. So you would expect their running game to get even worse from last season to this season. And they didn't do anything to address their offensive line. So I don't see how we could look at this team and think they're going to get any better when all the other teams in that division are getting better. So,
yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you said. And it's an interesting thing to think about, because the Rams, again, a couple years ago looked like, the cream of the crop. And if you remember, everybody that had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay was getting a head coaching job, and all of a sudden he went, this super genius guy, the youngest head coach in the NFL history. And then all of a sudden, I think that the big mistake they made is exactly what you kind of alluded to, and that they paid a quarterback top tier money for who is ultimately kind of a second tier talent. And he was a number one overall pick, but he just, again, from the eye test, he's not Andrew Luck. He's not even Cam Newton. He's
just okay.
Yeah, he's average, and he should not have been the highest paid player in the NFL for any amount of time. And it was just luck of the draw where he was the next man up. And I thought, I said it back then, we didn't have a show back then, but I wish we did, but that I thought Sean McVay would have been the first coach to buck the trend with paying re-signing these first round draft pick quarterbacks, or signing a quarterback off his rookie deal to a long-term deal. Because if you look at what they did while Jared Goff was a rookie, it was just hired guns all around. I mean, it was like an assassin's club. They had Clay Matthews, they had Ndamukong Suh, they had Aqib Talib, they had the list goes on and on. They had, before they paid Todd Gurley, then they paid Todd Gurley, and that was sort of the beginning of the end, because they paid him based on past performance, not what they expected of him. And then all of a sudden he got paid, and then C.J. Anderson is running the ball just as well as he is in the playoffs after sitting on the couch for 8 months. So I thought Sean McVay would have been the guy who, he had the perfect situation. He's young, he's innovative, people expect kind of this change-up thinking from him. I thought he would, and it wasn't his quarterback. He didn't draft Jared Goff. And so I thought that it was the stage was set for him to be this perfect test case for kind of starting over again, because then they could have had all of those hired guns. And they, don't forget, this year they didn't have a first round draft pick because they gave it away to trade for Jalen Ramsey. And Jalen Ramsey is a he's first round talent, I would agree, I would say, but that's still, I don't think cornerback was their biggest problem. And so there's a lot. You know, they did draft Cam Akers out of Florida State in round 2. They drafted a couple, Van Jefferson from Florida in round 2. And
a player that I didn't think they needed, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I don't know why they drafted Van Jefferson. I'm like, you don't need him. You need offensive line help.
Yes, exactly. You need a better running back, and you need some talent on the offensive line. So I don't expect much out of the Rams this year, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward. But in any event, all right, we're up against the clock. So, Jose, that's going to take us to the end of hour number 1. And so coming up next, in hour 2, we're going to be touching on a little bit later. We're going to go back to the AFC West and kind of round out that division, much in the same way we just did for the NFC. And then coming up next, we are going to celebrate in our own way about the comeback of sports, or some sports. And by celebrate, I mean I'm going to yell or come close to yelling about some issues that have been bothering me with Major League Baseball. And I have a big problem with it. And it's been, I'm genuinely angry about it. It's not just for clickbait or show material. I'm genuinely upset with Major League Baseball from top to bottom. And I'll tell you why after we come right back. So stick around. You can find us on iHeartRadio app. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram. Email us at the Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com. Benchwarmers with a Z. And with that said, we are going to take a break, and we'll be right back with hour 2 in just a little bit. So stick around.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.